Prabir, I strongly believe the pandemic is here and it's not yet over. COVID-19 situation has forced all of us to reboot, relook at workplace strategies. Purely from that standpoint, you talk about World Economic Forum, you would talk about McKinsey report. Everybody is talking about few unwritten competencies which is going to gain momentum in future. My question to you is, when it comes to HR practitioners, what are the absolute non-negotiable competencies that you would like to see in HR professional? And this is industry agnostic. If you are an HR professional, you must need to have this. And here I'm not talking about functional competencies, but anything else as a CEO, you would definitely want to see in HR professional?
Great question. I think this is a brilliant question. So let me just think aloud with you. First, I would like HR people to be people who are champions of enjoying ambiguity. Historically, we have been trying to reduce everything to process, forms, formats, SOPs. I think that is very dated. Gray is here to stay. You will never have 100% answer. You'll never have a situation where there is black and there is white. There is always going to be gray. Success, potential failure. It's almost going to be binary. And I think for HR to play in that kind of an ecosystem and a business environment or an operating environment, they themselves need to feel more at peace with ambiguity and therefore live with risks, live with a certain streak of entrepreneurship, experimentation, and all the things which go along with that. So ambiguity is very important. I think the second that I believe is very important and which has always been, and I've talked about it in the past, but will be even more important in the world of tomorrow, is the ability to influence. And influence is an art and a science. Some influence will come from your competence, your understanding of business, your domain. And I don't want to go there. It's all, to me, a given. But it's also an art. And I think people have to realize that whatever the debate about will HR be strategic, will it have a seat on the table? From my own personal experience, which has been very blessed, I will also admit. I think the only thing which I think was of great strength to me was the ability to influence anyone and everyone who matters. You have to be past masters of influence. HR is not going to have a charter of rights and a ticket to ride anywhere by itself. How will you build that ability to influence and influence differently depending on who you want to influence? Now, this is a leadership issue, but for me, HR is a leadership function, right? So influence is going to be a very important strength to build if you're building a career in HR. Third, I think, which will be very, very important is, do you have tenacity? The function is paid to applaud for someone's success and many times take a blow on your nose because someone else cannot be blamed. That's the professional hazard of the function. And it's not an easy function because, Anil, remember this, from the doorman to the chairman, everyone believes they know HR better than HR, right? There will always be pulls and pressures. It's like us watching Virat Kohli play a stroke and say, oh, he should have played like that. It's very easy for us to sit and comment. Same for HR. Everyone will have a view. Everyone will have a perspective. And I'm saying it is through all that maze you've got to kind of persevere. So tenacity is important because not everything that you do will be liked by everyone. You'll have your share of critics. Not everything that you are attempting to do will succeed. Organizations may not have the patience to carry their bat through, in a manner of speaking. So how do you take these shocks in your system? So, I always say if you thought HR was, a bed of roses or a walk in the garden, then you've joined the wrong profession. Not today, for sure. It is no longer a job where, you just come in and you make people feel happy and go away. That's not the job of HR. Happiness may be important, but it's not the purpose for what HR exists. So I think tenacity is important. The fourth, which if I think that will be very important, and it flows again with my starting comment, is I personally believe HR people must be very imaginative. They must always be thinking about a world which doesn't exist. See, it's one thing to be a follower, to be told by someone and to execute. I don't think that is what I would expect in a top-notch HR professional of tomorrow. I want that person, if I were the CEO or if I were the board, I would expect my HR to help me visualize, imagine a world, and then help me get to that world. And if HR is always going to be looking up for instructions and orders rather than helping with visualization and imagination, I don't think it will be good enough. So these are the four things that personally I think I would be very keen to see HR guys develop. And you made such a valid point, Anil, that the rest of the bread and butter competencies and issues, and whether you know as much of compensation management or you know as much about the laws. To me, those are given. And the more you rise in the HR hierarchy, as I have seen, I've always felt that I had some genius for hiring people who are better than me, every one of them, and they knew their onions better than I would know their sub function. But your job is to put it all together, visualize, evangelize, influence, sustain through all the ups and downs. And that is what will make, in my mind, a truly well-rounded, successful HR professional for the future.
Now, I have a related question also, Prabir. When we talk about HR, and you touched this point, as a strategic HR business partner and having a seat at the board and so on and so forth, how does one gain this credibility of being a trusted HR partner? There is a perception also in some organizations that HR is a good to have function, and it's values. They only talk about values and all qualitative stuff. So, in your opinion, how can HR practitioners quantify some of their contributions?
Again, it's a very, very sharp question, but let me start with putting a caveat. And the caveat is not mine or is not someone from the world of HR. I think Einstein, who said this: all that can be counted does not count, and all that cannot be counted truly matters, or something to this effect, right? I think part of the challenge that forget HR, that any organization has, is just because you find it more difficult to quantify certain things does not make it less important or less strategic. And unfortunately, most of the organizational leadership is more left-brained. There are more people who see the world as 2 + 2 is equal to 4. They are better practitioners of exactness, and therefore the right side of their thinking is a little less developed. And therefore, there are very few CEOs. You're very right. You said some organizations, I would say most organizations, their own, therefore, ask of, and it's so thrilling to meet a promoter or a CEO who actually is able to see it in its entirety. I've had the good fortune of working with some. I've also had the bad fortune of working with the other type, but that's the more preponderant one, who are chasing quarter-on-quarter, financial results. The question is, are you preparing the organization for beyond the quarter, for beyond the year? Now, this itself is an issue of influence. It's an issue of coaching. It's an issue of dialogue. But you raise the word credibility. To build credibility, you've got to win some near-term wins before you get the license to try and push the envelope a little out. And what are the near-term wins is about thinking from a position 2 levels higher. I always tell HR people, or for that matter, leaders in general, think of your role from a position which is 2 levels higher than yours. Your perspective of what value you can create will be much sharper. You will get far more strategic. You will get more focused. You will get more impactful. So the question is, if you're an order taker, even if you do it well, you will not have a seat at the table. There is no way, because your job will be seen as a minion. I told him or her, and they did a good job. You'll get your little piece of fish at the end of the year, but that's about it. But if you want a seat at the table, you must help the guy even think the near term a little better, a little more wholesome. Set a commitment or an assurance that you will deliver. HR particularly will have 20 people who will be their detractors. Because please remember, there are very few material things that HR does alone. And that is why it becomes a very difficult function to be in. If you're in R&D, your job is to do all your mixing of stuff and creating the product. If you're in sales, you're the guy who's going and selling the product. If you're HR, it's all about doing it through others. What of HR do we do together? Do we do alone? Do we hire alone? Actually, do we manage performance of an individual? Do we really decide the bonus of that individual? Do we actually take the firing decision? No, we become the convenient fall guy. Oh, HR has asked me to do, which is my issue with Tenacity and stuff like that. You have to take that. But credibility is about helping people reshape the expectation and ask, setting something that they will have the confidence and belief to deliver, saying no. Too many HR people like to be the good guy and say, yes, yes, yes. You overpromise and underdeliver. I mean, that was one thing I was very conscious of. Always say, it'll take me 8 months time, deliver it in 6 months. You delight the expectations. So again, it's an issue of helping co-create the thinking and expectations and delivering that. But most importantly, credibility is by engaging people in helping them solve their problems. Many a time, people HR slip into doing a job which they believe is their job. Technically, it is not their job. Hiring people is not HR's job alone. HR should build expertise, competence, and they have access to many other instruments and techniques of helping. Are you preparing your leaders to hire better? Are you coaching them to hire better? What questions do they ask? What kind of questions does HR ask when they are helping evaluate people? Let's also be honest, we are pathetic as well, right? And similarly, when it is about differentiating or performing or whatever is a business problem, let's say you are the business partner for supply chain. How do you understand the concept of inventory turns to make sure that your reward and recognition practice is linked to inventory turns, if that is the most important lever of business, right? So a lot of it is about involving and engaging line managers, which I think HR fights shy of. Either it gets scared, it doesn't have the curiosity to know, or third and most importantly, it attempts to do it itself, which is actually you are in no way to kind of fully justify. So helping set expectations, engaging and co-opting. I once worked with a CEO, and it's a great story I'm recalling right now. It was my early CHRO days, and I would think that I've thought through everything possible before I go to the CEO, thinking that I'm saving his time. But the CEO actually told me once, he says, Prabir, I know you think very completely, etc. But can you leave something a little open for me to add value? I also want to help bake the cake. So I realized that, HR must not necessarily go saying that I have all the answers, but to be able to engage people in solutioning, that it becomes a more created exercise. As far as the quantitative or the qualitative issue is, some things can be measured quantitatively, and we can definitely get better. But I'll also raise a caution. And I have done that in my CHRO life. And I will say that upfront, including with the board, including with very senior executives that I've worked with. Please don't force us to measure things for the sake of it. It is not worth the effort. Second is, when you start measuring it for the sake of it, people will concoct data in a manner that you will think that you're getting an outcome. But actually, it's a waste of time, effort, and focus. So it's an issue of belief. And that itself is a subject of dialogue and credibility. But you must deliver whatever you want to do, in the time that you did, and show quick wins. It's good for your own team, for your own self-worth, self-esteem. And very clearly, the more you kind of get your foot through the door, the more the door opens and you get invited for more meaningful conversation.